Let's call the May 14th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let's start with roll call.
Carrie? Here. Walton?
Here.
Wilhelm? Here. Stephenson?
Here.
Schlotthauer?
Here.
Hampy?
Here.
Kimball?
Present.
Ceremonies, announcements, appointments, presentations.
Just a quick little fact, today is National Underground America Day. So today just acknowledges those people that actually live underground.
It's a thing.
Well, actually, I looked this up. There's like 6,000 people that actually do that.
Really?
Like Earth Homes?
Yeah, earth
Yeah.
homes.
Oh, berm home.
The benefit of it is a stable temperature and out of the elements. That's the two big benefits, they say.
Cave dwellers.
I thought he meant the graveyard.
No. All right, moving on. Any amendments to the agenda? John?
There's none. Sorry.
No worry.
I was still processing everything.
Yeah. Declaration of conflict, ex parte contacts, site visits, commission members.
I have a conflict on the consent calendar, so I will be recusing myself from that.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. With that being said, let's go over the consent calendar.
Okay, so we got the action item A, which is the meeting minutes from the April 9th, 2024 meeting. We got item B being the Kruger Annexation zoning recommendation, file number ANNX 23-5. Item C is the North Shore subdivision reason decision, file number SUBD 23-3. Item D is the Legion Park SUBD, that's the special use permit and subdivision reason decision for file numbers SUP 23-4 and SUBD 23-6. We got item E, which is the Pleasant View Apartments reason decision, file number SUP 24-1. And we also have the 1170 Mullen reason decision, file number SUP 24-2.
Okay, thank you. If everybody's had an opportunity to review those items, I'd entertain a motion, please.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, we have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Roll call, please.
Hampy?
Yes.
Wilhelm?
Yes.
Stephenson?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Schlotthauer?
Yes.
Kimball?
Abstain.
All right, thank you. Next item, citizen issues. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission on items not on the agenda tonight. Persons wishing to speak will have 5 minutes. Comments related to pending public hearings, including decisions appeal to City Council, are out of order at this time. Repeating comments are also out of order. Comments regarding any city employees are inappropriate and should be directed to the mayor's office. Do we have anybody that would wishing to speak on citizen issues tonight? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to public hearings. If anybody wants to speak with the public hearings, I know a couple of you guys are already doing it. Fill out the paperwork in the back. Bring that up front.
And there was no unfinished or old business.
Oh, did I skip that? Oh, yeah. Because there was nothing there, I just skipped it. I was trying to be efficient. Thank you. No unfinished or old business, thank you. I just skipped right over that. Public hearing, so, yeah, so fill out the form if you want to speak on the, for any public hearings. Bring that up and we'll give you that time when that comes. So, start with the first one here is Mountain View Bible Church Annexation File ANNXX-3-6, and we'll open the hearing.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ethan Porter, one of the planners here with the city to present staff side for Mountain View Bible Church Annexation, MVBC. I will caveat this with the staff report. I noticed there was an error brought to my attention in the conditions 2 and 3. It outlined and referenced an exhibit X-XX, which should not be that. It should be exhibit A2. As far as the concept site plan that was provided by the applicant, it outlines kind of where the future right-of-way is going to be and the phasing plan, and so that's what it should reference as Exhibit A2 for that. So I just want to make that clear.
So both of those should be A2?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So, with that being said, this project, again, the owner is Mountain View Bible Church Incorporated. The applicant tonight here to present on their behalf is Connie Kruger from Stonehenge. They are requesting to review and provide a recommendation to City Council for the zoning designation of limited commercial on approximately 2.7 acres. It's a total of 3.6 when you include the right-of-way, but this is going to be a part of their annexation request that they would like you to approve the zoning or provide a recommendation to City Council for approving the zoning that they're requesting. The project location here, Chase and Prairie on the southeast corner. It's there hatched in red. And you have Crown Point to the northeast there. And then further Fair Estates, which was to come on the south or in southwest, excuse me, across Chase Road as well. You can kind of see the layout there. They're both arterial roadways, so Prairie is going to be a principal arterial and Chase Road is going to be a minor arterial roadway, so it's right around that, right on the corner of that roundabout, so kind of gives you the context there. Zoning for this area, you can see Crown Point there in the purple and the dark purple. That's the smart code zoning, and then you have the yellow being R1 single family residential, and then the light yellow is going to be that R1S zoning district. So kind of gives the context of this area. Looking at the land use and the site itself, currently there's a church and a residential use on it. It's over the Ratrum Perry Aquifer. The wastewater would be provided by the city of Post Falls, and there would be some improvements following development as well if they wanted to increase capacity for the sewer requirements. So at that time, though, the city would be willing to serve the property at that requested density that they're proposing, but there would need to be improvements as outlined in the staff report for the Fisher Lift Station and Fisher Gravity Main Extension. So those associated site improvements would need to be completed and done prior to that development, kind of looking at that sewer capacity. But at that point in time, though, they would be, the city would be able to serve them pending those improvements. The water in this area is East Green Acres Irrigation District. And then the traffic, a little bit more about kind of Prairie and Chase. Like I mentioned, their arterial statuses, but the Prairie Avenue is a critical arterial corridor by the KMPO. And then also kind of the restraints on this site, since its proximity to the roundabout does provide a little bit of restraint, but just due to proximity to that roundabout. But they were able to make it work based on that Exhibit A2, kind of what I mentioned. Looking at some of that, they did meet with staff to discuss that a little bit, and so that has been addressed and okay for what they were presenting. Looking at the future land use designation, we can see that it's the blue, which would fall in line with transitional, and then it's within that commercial node. You can kind of see that dashed red circle. You can see it a little bit better on the Central Prairie focus area there to the right, but it does lie within the transitional zoning inside that commercial node per the future land use map, as well as it is in the Central Prairie focus area. So with those two being stated there, transitional, looking at that future land use designation, its assigned zones should be compatible with adjacent zones and uses within the city and consistent with the guiding principles of that focus area that it lies within. So again, with that Central Prairie focus area, there's some highlights there outlined in the staff report as well, but you're looking at kind of more commercial development along arterial roadways, higher roadway traffic or higher vehicles per day traffic would accommodate more commercial uses and kind of that zoning as well. And so within the comprehensive plan, we look at the goal 7, plan for and establish types and quantities of land uses in Post Falls, supporting community needs and the city's long-term sustainability. So supporting this goal, we would direct your attention to policy 24 and 26, discussing pretty much protecting the transportation corridor, the encroachment, and preserving those right-of-ways for the future utilities and traffic corridors themselves, as well as maintaining and improving the continuity of those sidewalks and kind of within those frontage improvements in the future upon development would be connecting that up and maintaining and preserving those as well for those uses. So looking at that transportation aspect, we want to make sure that the long-term sustainability of the site is being met, as well as meeting those focus areas and allowing a commercial zoning to go within a commercial node, and being along roadways that, would be ideal, which would be arterial roadways, again, Prairie and Chase both being arterial roadways. Looking at goal 12, maintain the city and Post Falls long-term fiscal health. The supportive policy for this would be looking at policy 1, supporting land use patterns that maintain or enhance community levels of service, foster long-term fiscal health of the community, maintain and enhance resident quality of life, and promote compatible, well-designed development. So a lot of this is kind of what we could expect or may be relevant to development of commercial or development of the site in general, to kind of help promote that goal 12 there, which in turn promotes the Central Prairie focus area and aligns with that future land use designation. So with that being said, staff did route and send notices to the jurisdictions and kind of provide them a time to comment and give any feedback or anything they notice or they have issues with. And so the list there of who we contacted, and then of them, what we got back was basically the Post Falls School District remaining neutral, Cooney County and Fire and Rescue, they'll comment during the permitting process. The Yellowstone Pipeline Company didn't have a comment. Post Falls Police Department remained neutral. And then DEQ and Post Falls Highway District didn't have a comment. Panhandle Health did have a comment. They didn't have a comment really. They just said, hey, if you expanding basically the site and the need for septic, you would have to connect up to the city, which is our requirement regardless upon development. So if they annex into the city and they're going for development in the future, they would have to hook up to sanitary sewer. So looking at the zone change review criteria, making sure the proposed zoning district is consistent with the future land use map and focus area contained in the comprehensive plan. Kind of mentioned that already, looking at the future land use designation in that Central Prairie focus area. The proposed zoning district for review criteria 2, making sure it's consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, making sure that they're relevant for what is under consideration tonight. So kind of outline those goals and policies as well that are relevant or may be relevant to this proposal. And then you have zone change review criteria 3, looking at the demonstrable adverse impact upon the delivery of services by any political subdivision providing public services within the city. So all those agency comments were received back. None of them outlined anything glaring, or they had major issues or identified demonstrable adverse impact upon their delivery. So with that being said, I will stand for questions for staff if you have any at this time.
Anybody have any questions?
I do real quick. On the items to be considered, you said on 2 and 3, we show exhibits XX. What was that again?
So yeah, so it should have said Exhibit A2.
Okay.
For that. And so the Exhibit A2 is basically in the staff report, the applicant's proposal and narrative. And so in that narrative, they outline a conceptual plan and phasing, as well as outlining the boundaries for the right-of-way. And so that's what it was supposed to reference in the staff report. There's got some mix-up with some exhibits on my part, so forgive me for that.
So they're both the same?
Correct.
All right, okay, all right, thank you.
Starts on page 62, Nancy. You wanna
Okay.
Take a peek. So, the one question I had was the connectivity to the current city is just that little corner.
It's to the west. Let's see,
West.
looking back
Maybe I'm looking at it wrong
at
then.
this. So you can see
Okay.
it kind of right there. So
Across
to the
the
west across Chase, they have the R1 zoning, but it takes up all of that right away up to the point of what right away they're going to be dedicated. So that right away connection would
Okay.
be that
That's how
congruent
it
with
is.
city
Okay.
limits. Yep. It wasn't that way before until Fair Estates actually had to annex in. So the applicant, I believe, they discussed with staff, and it was pending the Fair Estates across Chase to be.
Makes sense.
Ethan, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What's the advantage, disadvantage of of the limited commercial versus, say, CCS for this piece?
The advantages?
Yeah, why limited commercial rather than
So
CCS?
the limited commercial kind of secures that commercial zoning for future, say if the church ends up moving or they're no longer on that site, that zoning, oh, I guess versus CCS you're saying. It secures the zoning for commercial is what I was getting at. But the difference between that, the limited commercial outright permits a church's use, and I don't think they want to tear it down. CCS wouldn't allow a church outright, or I don't recall if it's a special use or not outright permitted off the top of my head, but the limited commercial does allow the church outright or as a permitted use. So that's why they would go for limited commercial. You secure your future zoning for commercial in that commercial node, as well as you're still allowing the church to be in use, and so.
With the couple times here in the recent past, we've seen churches sell their property after going into limited commercial, and then for multifamily, and then the multifamily is an outright approved use now.
For multifamily, not in limited commercial and CCS, you'd have to go through a special use permit. I believe you have to go through a special use permit for any multifamily other than townhomes for.
In
limited
either.
commercial. In either, correct.
LC or,
LC would, to my knowledge, only allows for townhomes outright permitted.
I believe
but
on the LC, the multifamily
is special.
is not a special, it was allowed for.
The townhomes, 6 units
Six
per.
six or
You
less
did it as
units.
townhomes, like Ethan's, then that would be permitted. But you have to get a special use permit to develop multifamily in the limited commercial consistent with the medium density. And if you're in CCS, you get a special use permit at the high density. So, but what Ethan was stating was correct.
So the one would be outright to medium density, the other would require a special use for high density.
No, both the limited commercial requires for multifamily requires a special use permit. Same with the CCS requires a special use permit. It's just the density allocation for the limited commercial is at the medium density.
Gotcha.
Versus the CCS, you can go to the high density. Now, you can do 6-unit townhomes outright and it's kind of this weird little nuance, in the limited commercial, and that's permitted outright.
Yeah,
And how townhomes are,
and I think that's what we saw the last time.
and those are on platted lots though. Those are considered single-family homes on their own platted lots, townhomes as defined within Title 18 zoning. Rather than building it, it's a little confusing. You could do townhome construction in the building code, but that wouldn't be allowed. That would be considered multifamily from Title 18 zoning. So it would have to be platted on their own lots, single family, 0 lot line product.
Gotcha.
Commissioner,
Yep.
Commissioner, let me clarify. I think that the religious function is a permitted use in the CCS zone as well,
Thank you.
outright permitted.
The uses allowed in the limited commercial tend to be more neighborhood commercial related versus as broad as the CCS. CCS does have more of a broad permittable use in the CCS. There's certain uses that aren't allowed in the.
He's reviewing that.
Yeah.
That you, yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks, Ethan.
Any other questions for staff?
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Ethan. The applicant would like to come up. Name for the record.
My name is Connie Kruger, and I'm here representing the Mountain View Bible Church. And we have some members of the church that are here today, too, that will come up during public comment and also speak to the request today. So some of the information that I have in my presentation will be, will replicate what Ethan has already shown you, but we never really know. Oh, do I have a, okay, sorry about this, I've got to get right. Didn't think I did, but apparently I do. Okay. There we go. Okay. So some of the information will replicate what he has already provided, but as you guys know, the burden of proof is on the applicant to show that we meet the conditions or the standards of approval that the city has. So tonight we're here to request both an annexation and a zoning designation, and this just shows you the location of the property. As you can see, this is on the south side of West Prairie Avenue and to the east of Chase. And you can really, see from various information that we're going to present today that this church is already existing here and is really part of the greater Post Falls community. Our property, Ethan has already mentioned, we have 2 parcels, and combined they equal 2.7 acres. The total acreage of the annexation is actually much larger than this, and that is because the city has requested that we annex the adjacent right-of-ways and that we take the full adjacent right-of-way to us. So we're not taking a half width of right-of-way, which used to be, a little bit more of a practice that you saw with the annexation. Some of the highlights of our request, I think this just kind of summarizes everything that we're going to talk about tonight. But the reasons that we think that we are a good candidate for annexation and also for the zoning that we're requesting. First of all, of course, we're adjacent to the city of Post Falls. We talked a little bit about that adjacency on the west side of the property. This is becoming an area where we're starting to become an island of unincorporated property, and it tends to be a good annexation practice to annex unincorporated islands of land. This is also consistent with the city's future plans. So we have a limited commercial that we're planning for within a mapped commercial activity node. This is an expansion of the church services, and we'll talk about this a little bit further. But this is for the residents of the surrounding area. And the church actually has a mission statement which is very specific to serving the residents of Post Falls. So they're not trying to serve Coeur d'Alene, they're not trying to serve Hayden. It wasn't anything that they incorporated into their vision statement after we started talking about this annexation. It's something that's been a long-standing part of who they are. We're also located on minor and principal arterial roads, and with the traffic patterns, we see little to no impact to local roads. We'll be served by city and different district utilities, and we also will be paying capitalization and impact fees to mitigate our specific infrastructure impacts. So often churches, because they are not taxed, are not thought of as, maybe contributing or mitigating their impacts. But the reality of it is with building permits, capitalization and impact fees will be paid to mitigate some of those impacts. A little bit of information about the vision of the Mountain View Bible Church. Again, we've talked about how they would like to provide support services to their surrounding area within Post Falls. And we've talked a little bit about the fact that most of their new membership within the last few years has actually lives within about 1 mile of the church. So you can see they're really kind of woven into the fabric of the Post Falls community. They have different services that they offer, and these are offered throughout the week. So parenting and marriage classes, support groups, biblical counseling, transformational teaching, and kids club. And if anybody has observed the growth of churches within the North Idaho area, you see that they are really starting to become part of the community. They're offering more and more things throughout the week, more things to support their membership. And so Mountain View Bible is the same. They would like that opportunity to be able to grow their church and to be able to provide more services. So with that, they are planning on a building expansion to the east, but before they can do that, they actually need to address some parking issues. And we'll look a little bit at their site plan too. The site plan approval isn't really a part of this annexation request, but it is something that we want to have contemplated in the annexation agreement because of some of the right-of-way impacts that we see. Right now, the on-site septic is limited, so with membership expansion and increasing those offerings, and the fact that there are discharge limits over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer, they are limited in being able to expand their membership. So being able to come into the city, be annexed and have the opportunity for city services is very important to their mission. And again, working with the city and with the neighboring properties as utilities are brought into the area is something that they're aware of and that they're looking forward to. So with this, we are requesting an annexation and development agreement that addresses some of the needs that the church has. Mountain View Bible Church is a small church. They've been around for a long, long time. Their growth has been, when you think of the length of time they've been around, and we'll let them speak to that. But their growth has been, fairly slow. And so with that, they have limited tithes and donations. So they're not a church that can go out, buy a building, tear it down, build a campus. That's not really the way that they function. So this progressive development is going to be very important to them. And so with that, they would like an agreement that allows them to phase some of their on-site improvements, and this is relative to utility extensions, frontage improvements, and right-of-way dedications. So you can see here with the site plan, the parking lot that is on the south and on the east side of the property actually doesn't exist. The current parking lot is on the west side of the property. So as they grow and expand the parking lot, they'll start to move the parking from the west side down to the south side of the building and then expand out to the east side. And so they actually will have need of that west side parking lot for some period of time as they're expanding into these other areas. You can also see here in the dark blue block a phase 2 building expansion. And this is planned in the second phase of overall site development. So the idea would be to expand the building if there are any frontage improvements needed at that time, to construct those, to connect to the city's sewer system, and at that point in time to remove that western parking lot. The right-of-way that the city has planned for this area is a full width of 110 feet, and that's because of the arterial status of Prairie Road. And so with that, it will be very important to be able to contemplate what the right-of-way dedication will be right now and to incorporate that into our agreement. And so with this graphic here, you can see the current right-of-way, and this is a little bit difficult to see, but on the left side, I put a couple of little measurements showing the 25 feet from center line. And the center line is a little bit off kilter because of the roundabout project that has been constructed. But if you look at where the old existing right-of-way was, you can see where our current northern property line is with that 25 feet on each side of center line. So remembering that we would need to expand our half of the right-of-way out to 55 feet. So right now it's at 25 feet. So as we expand into as we add another 30 feet to this, that right-of-way would actually come through the buildings that you see here. And then the city also will require an additional 15-foot easement on top of that. So one of the things that we've talked to the city about is to take the site plan that we have currently and to mimic the right-of-way that we have planned in that area. And this has been to Rob Paulus. He's aware of it, and he has agreed that that would be appropriate in that area, given the recent roundabout project and other things that are planned in the area. So we just want to be sure that we have that within the agreement. Moving on to the standards, limited or neighborhood commercial and low-density residential zoning is typically assigned to properties as they proceed further away from the higher-intensity urban activity. So if we're requesting the limited commercial zoning, and with that, you can see our location, which is, we're away from the more urbanized areas of downtown Post Falls. We're moving out toward that outer fringe, and so we really do think that this is an appropriate zoning designation. Other things about the limited commercial zone district, and I've kind of highlighted these. I'm not going to go into them in great depth, but you can see here that the plan is for service uses of a modest scale in areas. So we've talked before about how Mountain View Bible is a small church. They're growing at small increments. So again, kind of fitting the modest scale of what is planned for a limited commercial zone district. And we've discussed this already, but religious institutions are permitted outright in the LC zone district. Another standard is that the amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the future land use map. And so Ethan did cover this in some depth, but you can see where our location is. It looks like my stars shifted slightly, but again, we're in one of these commercial activity nodes. And the plan for this Central Prairie area with the transitional designation is to offer higher density housing, which isn't what we're planning, but with community amenities to broaden their appeal to buyers. So often I think of that a little bit more as like a PUD with those types of community amenities, but I think a church also fits with the type of community amenities you would want to see in that zone district. And that future growth should embrace a variety of housing types and land uses. So again, this is providing diversity into that area. Another standard zoning is assigned following consideration of such items as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic or natural features. So just looking to public services, we've already covered the number of agencies that were notified and who has commented. I just did a little synopsis here of some of the key public services facilities, the agencies that we really see providing service with the annexation. We have the Post Falls School District. They were neutral on the zoning and annexation, and again, the act of annexing and zoning doesn't have an immediate impact on schools. We're also not providing any type of a residential land base with this. We have public safety. We have the police station within 5 miles. There's no immediate impact. They also were neutral on this, and we will be paying public safety impact fees with development. The fire station is about 4 miles away, at least Station 1 is. And again, no immediate impact over and above what would currently be there with mutual aid agreements and the like. Annexation would have no immediate impact. They reserve their comments for their permitting process and will be paying any type of impact fee that is required. And then parks and open space, we do have parks within near proximity. No immediate impact, and we would pay any park impact fees with development if required. We are located on Prairie Avenue, which is a principal arterial, and North Chase Road, which is a minor arterial. This provides us access to regional transportation systems and services. So if you leave the property, you travel down Prairie, you hit 41. If you're traveling east, if you travel west, you can hit Highway 53. You travel out to I-90. So again, really nice mobility from the site. We will provide those dedicated right-of-way and easements with our annexation or at the time the city requires it. We've covered a lot of this additional information, but again, the city of Post Falls does have adequate capacity to provide sanitary sewer service. The sewer isn't currently there, but there is a planned capital infrastructure project for that area to provide that. And then East Green Acres has adequate capacity to provide for our water. Our last standard amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies found in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. I have a deep dive into that was put into the narrative, and Ethan also covered some of those items, so I'm not going to spend time on that tonight. I do have slides if you do have any questions that we can pull up. But within the narrative, I have addressed the different comprehensive plan goals and policies that seem to apply. So with that, I stand for any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
I have a quick question with regards to the sewer, actually the existing septic system. If phase 1 were to happen, would it, prior to public sewer being available, would that impair the existing septic system?
No, the septic system is actually located up close to where you see that phase 2 building expansion.
Okay.
So it is in an area that we currently have planned more for green space.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Another quick question. Your planned entrance and exit only onto Prairie?
There is an entrance planned on Chase, which is down at the far southwest corner. It's kind of difficult to see, but
Yeah,
right
I
between
see.
those two
Yeah, I wasn't
trees.
sure.
Is that where the current
Yeah.
entrance is and exit, or is it going to be farther down?
Yeah, I believe there's a current entrance there too, but we can pull up some aerial imagery and take a look at that.
So what will you be able to do now if you don't have the sewer available now? Are you will you be able to expand without adding the sewer?
No, the church has really looked into sewer, and they can speak to a little bit more when they come up to comment. But my understanding is that they've been measuring flow, trying to see if there's an opportunity to expand with the current limits that you have from PhD, and it's really not looking positive to be able to do that. Yeah.
So you're saying it's not looking positive to be able to tie into the existing sewer?
No, to expand the on-site septic.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And so, but there's no sewer available yet, so
No.
what's the immediate plan?
The immediate plan would be the parking lot expansion.
And that, do you need to annex into the city for that?
We don't need to be annexed into the city, but we want to get out ahead of that and be able to move on that when we can. So right now, the Mountain View Bible has already hired an architect to design that second phase of the building. So they are moving forward with plans, but they just want to know that they're going to be in the city and know that they'll be able to connect.
In your presentation, you did say that there is some occupancy constraints until it annexes in the city, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But then that would still require it to connect the sanitary sewer to achieve those occupancy
It would,
limits.
yeah. And that's why that's why we're proposing a phased agreement, and then if we, and I don't know how easily I'll be able to move back to this slide, but let's give it a try. So if you look at the phasing plan that we have here, it's kind of that little area that's indented there, or indented. And the first phase would be to expand the existing parking to the east, and then the second would be to expand the building to connect to sewer at that time and do any other improvements that are needed. So that would be a later phase when the sewer is available.
The parking that you have noted there on the bottom and then on the east, that is already there?
The parking, there's a little bit on the south and there's a little bit, let me see if I can find an aerial photograph. So if you take a look at the aerial photograph on the right side, you can kind of see where the parking is currently located at. Right now, the parking, that's actually a pretty steep slope where the parking currently ends. So as you drop from the western parcel into the eastern parcel, there's quite a grade change. So a lot of fill will need to be brought in to continue to expand that parking lot out to the east in the way that you see with that site plan. So the site plan that I just showed you actually covers both of those properties that you see here. So it's a little bit visually deceptive because when you look at it, it looks like it's just one, but it's actually for both.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So I'll go back.
Okay, thank you. Public comment? No? Thought we had public comment. All right.
Commissioners, we had some folks sign up for public comment. Unfortunately, they were for the Kruger annexation, which was approved for the consent agenda tonight. So there's two written public comments, not for this public hearing. So just for the audience, the Kruger annexation was approved in the consent agenda already, and that's not on the agenda anymore.
Gotcha.
But I don't think there's any public comments for this one.
The public hearing, though, is going to be for city council on the annexation.
Could it be that they were confused that Connie Kruger was the applicant or part of and the Kruger annexation got it mixed up?
Is that what it was? So we'll just swipe it out, rewrite it, allow people to speak. So. Yeah, it's got the right address on here, so. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's got the right annex number. Okay. Now that we got that figured out. Yeah, did you got?
So did I just change up that 6 instead of that? Because I put this one in, and I put this number. We meant to put this.
Yeah,
in.
I think they fixed it.
Oh, you fixed that, right?
Yeah. So are you
Yes.
Jeff?
I'm Zach.
Zachary.
Yeah.
All right. What do you want to do? All right.
All right.
Name and address for the record, 4 minutes.
My name is Zachariah Kemper. My address is 4940 West Lemonwood Lane here in Post Falls. I'm one of the pastors at Mountain View Bible Church, and we're excited to be a part of the Post Falls community. Our church was planted in the Post Falls community in 1978, and we've been at our current location there at the corner of Chase and Prairie since 1980. We are very excited to be able to minister to the people of Post Falls. Like Connie Kruger was mentioning earlier, this is a part of our mission statement, and it has been for over 20 years, and that we desire to reach people in the Post Falls areas radiating outward from Post Falls. And so this is really the heartbeat and the burden of our mission is to serve the community that we have been placed in. Right now, our size limitations of our facilities, and especially our parking lot, are impeding our ability to serve the community that we are in. One of the things that we've experienced is in the past 5 years with this challenge, we've seen also our limitation for our facilities being able to handle the number of people in our community that need these services as well. And so even more recently, we've been trying to even have 2 services, mainly due to our parking limitation that we have. As was mentioned earlier, we are not a big church, and so the expenses related to expanding our facilities, particularly in design of those facilities with architects, are significant for us. And so the ability to plan in a phased way and also to know what the plan parameters can be is really important to us. So things such as the right-of-ways being designated and knowing what parameters we need to fit inside are going to be very significant. Even though we are a small church, we want to serve and bless this community in a big way. As we've seen the Post Falls community grow outwards towards our church, we see that as an opportunity for us to minister to people that we believe God's bringing right to our front door. And I know that all of you as leaders in the community have that same desire to serve this community, and that's ours as well. And so our just desire is that you help us to be able to do this same mission as well. So thank you.
Thank you. We have in favor, wishing to speak. I'm going to butcher your last name, so I apologize. Jeff Rakoy? Roy? Huh?
It's Rahoy.
Rahoy. Okay, sorry.
Commission members, thank you for allowing me to be here and just speak with you. My name is Jeff Rahoy, and I am a vice chairman of the Board of Elders at Mountain View Bible Church, where I've been able to be a part of serving in that church for over 20 years. And currently have the opportunity to serve in leadership for our children's outreach ministries and our children's ministries within the church. So I just wanted to take just a couple of your minutes to share with you a little bit about some of the opportunities and offerings that Mountain View has to offer our community. As a church, we have our regular Sunday school, which we serve ages 3 all the way up through senior and high school, and then even adult. But we also have a regular youth group that meets weekly, and we have our summer camps throughout the summer. And those are ministries for the people that really attend our church. But our youth group and our summer camps, every year they're attended by community members that don't regularly attend Mountain View. As you've heard be shared here, one of our part of our mission is to serve the people of Post Falls. And there's 3 other areas that we're already currently reaching out into the community to do this, and I'm excited to share those with you now. The first is a midweek club, and this is a club that meets September through April, and it's for ages 3 through grade 6. And in that club, there's activity times, there's a story time, but a part of that too is also really encouraging and teaching the kids how to be good community members with a community service aspect to it as well, which we're really proud about. And then also we have a week-long summer club of June that runs during the day for kids and families. And then lastly, we have our campus club that's called Alive that meets at Post Falls High School every Wednesday, and that's an opportunity for community members and students to be able to meet and discuss issues that are pertinent to their lives. And so one of the coolest things about these last 3 opportunities that I've just shared with you is the fact that all of those are they're more well attended by people that don't regularly attend our church, but by community members. And so, as you've heard said, one of our passions is to continue to serve our community, as is yours. And so we're just glad that we have the opportunity to do that. So thank you for your consideration for annexation and the time you've given me today.
All right, thank you. Any other ones? Nope. All right. So we had 2 in favor, so probably no need for rebuttal. Nope. All right. Close out the hearing, and we'll go into our review criteria.
Can I ask a quick question before we start the review? Or is that, can't do that now?
Ends.
Okay, so close it.
Is it to staff?
Well, yeah, to staff. It was just a clarification. On the requirement to hook into the city sewer and stuff when it becomes available. So if they get to the point that they wanted to start the construction of the second phase and sewer's not available there, is that going to hold, that will hold them up as far as construction? Being that they can't expand the current system, right?
Here comes Rob.
Looks
I
like
think Rob's coming up.
Mr.
Okay.
Paulus will answer that one.
Members of the Commission, Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. As is laid out in the staff report, that is correct. They will not be able to expand to any physical expansion of the building until sanitary sewer is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commission. What's before you tonight is a recommendation of zoning for file number ANX 23-6. The zone, the initial zoning review criteria. We've discussed it a little bit tonight. The first criteria is consideration of whether the proposed zoning district is consistent with a future land use map and the focus area contained within the currently adopted Post Falls Comprehensive Plan.
Does everybody think?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think specifically the focus area talks about there being a commercial node at that intersection, and the limited commercial is one of those soft transitions from residential kind of at those kinds of nodes, where those seem to be a little more appropriate than sometimes the more intense uses that come with CCS.
Yep.
Thank you. Second criteria, is the proposed zoning district, the limited commercial, consistent with the goals and policies contained in the currently adopted Post Falls Comprehensive Plan, which are relevant to the area under consideration? And in this prompt, we're looking for identification of goals and policies
Right. So
that might be applicable.
I wrote down, I mean, there's quite a bit in both the narrative as well as the staff report. Ones in particular that come to mind are policies 24, 26, and 33, which talk about transportation corridors, transportation plans, sidewalk connectivity, which are all things that will happen as part of the frontage improvements. Policy 8 hits infill, and while this is kind of a, it is surrounded essentially on almost 3 sides by city. So I consider it to be an infill, which is a priority for annexation. And policy 72, which talks about protecting the aquifer. And it's anytime we can get a septic system off the aquifer and into our municipal sewer system, that's a benefit to the community as a whole and meets policy 72.
Anything else to add? Anyone else? I think that covers a lot of them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Finally, consideration of whether the proposed zoning district creates a demonstrable adverse impact upon the delivery of any services by a political subdivision providing public services within the city.
Nothing
Now
was
there's
identified.
unnoted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any commissioner comments, or do we want to move on to a motion?
I would just like to say that in light of the previous two church annexations we've had that led to subsequent sales to developers and elevated, whatever the, I guess they weren't high-density residential, they were considered medium-density residential, but is there, I definitely am in favor of the church being able to annex into Post Falls, being able to expand their membership, their facilities, their parking lot, that all sounds great. I think that everything we're contemplating here is a commercial use in the commercial node, which is great. I'm just wondering, is there anything we can put into the development agreement that limits future residential use so that it definitely is commercial?
Thank you for the question. Right now, since we're considering simply the action of the zoning designation, the focus should be on what zoning designation is appropriate. If the commission is inclined to give a zoning designation that limits residential uses, then perhaps another zoning designation aside from limited commercial would be appropriate. I'm not familiar with which one that might be.
Well,
but
we
the development
often put restrictions in
Yeah.
development agreement.
And like I said, we're making the recommendation for annexation. Annexation goes to council, and then they look at the zoning recommendation from us. If at that time we can craft a development agreement that limits their ability to transition into residential, we could consider it at that time. But I don't recommend we put something like that into the recommendation at this point.
So that would be more something for city council.
Yeah, yes.
To
Why do we often have 6 or 8 or 10 restrictions on the development agreement coming out of planning and zoning?
Well, generally, planning and zoning is given, we're not adding a whole, we have conditions of approval, right? And in those conditions, we're dealing with, certain things that's under the purview of that zoning recommendation. And this, for instance, when it's restricting in the development agreement, like has been brought up, that is a condition that, those conditions generally get added on that annexation decision, then that's done at city council.
You can make a recommendation to include as an item considered for inclusion in the annexation agreement, some sort of restriction on residential use in the future. Now, the developer may say, the property owner may say, sorry, I'm not in favor of that, and therefore that's not something I'm going to agree to, and I don't want annexation if you're going to limit my future uses or ability to transact. So, that's a recommendation you can make. Whether or not the council ultimately adopts it, we have seen a number of cases recently where annexations into the city or zone changes have been conditioned on limited use for residential, usually multifamily. But
That's my thought.
Yeah.
I do know, looking at the last city council meeting, that there is some concern about, I don't want to call it bait and switch, but kind of what you're talking about, saying one thing and then doing this.
Well, plans change, and
Yeah,
I think we just want to
totally.
preserve the commercial.
Yeah, totally. I don't, per se, my opinion, I don't have any concerns with this, but I can see where you're coming from. And I do know that, that the city council, they're definitely keeping that in mind as they're looking at these hearings going forward. So that's my 2 cents on that one. But I hear where you're coming from, though.
I think I'd differentiate this in a way from some of the prior ones where this already has a developed church on it versus, I think, one of the ones the one off of Cecil was just 10 acres of bare dirt and
Greens Ferry?
One on Greens Ferry also.
Greens Ferry and Prairie.
Greens Ferry.
Yeah.
And I think they're still planning on putting a church there on the one on Greens
Some of
Ferry.
it. There'll be some church.
Yeah, some church. And then I think there was the one off of Pole Line off by Fennicus,
Yep.
Catholic Church, and they built there.
Yeah, they built there.
So, I guess, kind of a mixed bag, but I think it's one of the first times that I've seen that it's an annexation of a church building.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful. If you restrict a residential use, and that's how you word it, then that restricts the city's ability to maybe have a pastor's house. Because now you have a residential house in conjunction with the function of the church. And so, and then another thing to consider, let's just say it was a blank, vacant lot. You know, there was nothing on it. It was an empty field at this location based off the goals and policies. Would you want a residential restriction on this lot? And so, versus, yes, now, yes, they are a church and they plan on being a church. And yeah, we have had some where they've switched multitude 10 years later. But at the end of the day, what does the goals and policies fit what they're asking or even what you're contemplating?
I think the real issue is in our wording of our LC code, and that's probably something that needs to be addressed down the road. That would just simplify everything.
Yeah, that might be the answer right there.
All right, good discussion. That being said, anybody like to make a motion?
Okay, Commission, let me point out one other item that I noticed in the staff report. There are a number of items, if we are going to make a recommendation for the inclusion and annexation agreement, I think that the staff report has, on that same section that Ethan mentioned with the Exhibit XX, I think the wrong roadways are designated. It says Pleasant View and Celtice.
Oh, yeah.
On paragraphs 2 and 3. I believe those should be
Prairie and Chase.
Prairie and Chase.
Mhm.
So I'm just with that change, if we're going to make a motion, I'd just like to correct that, please.
Yeah, so please include that with whatever motion.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for pointing that out, yeah.
Are you ready for a motion?
Yes, please.
I move to recommend approval of file number, or MVBC annexation file number ANNX 23-6, finding that the requested zoning of limited commercial meets the approval criteria of Post Falls Municipal Code 18.20.100 as outlined in our deliberation, and direct staff to prepare a zoning recommended to be provided to City Council, including items 1 through 5 to be considered for inclusion in an annexation agreement, amending item number 2 to read Prairie Avenue instead of Pleasant View Road, and to change Exhibit X-XX to Exhibit A-2, and to amend item 3 to reference Chase Road versus Celtice Way, and to change Exhibit XXX to Exhibit A-2.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor,
I'll second.
and we have a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Carrie,
Yes.
Walton,
Yes.
Schlaughauer,
Yes.
Hempy,
Yes.
Wilhelm,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Kimball.
Yes.
All right, that will move to City Council. If I can get my agenda to work. See, that's the, I can't get that one to pull up because we're on the PDF.
Oh, we are on the PDF.
I'll let them clear out. I'll just read it.
Yeah, anybody else having trouble pulling that up?
All right, we'll open up the second public hearing, which is Title 18 and Title 18A file number TA 24-1 amendments, housekeeping amendment.
Yes.
Mr. Manley.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager here at the City of Post Falls, presenting this proposal to amend Title 18 and 18A. The applicant is the Planning Division here at the City, and we're requesting you forward a recommendation of approval to City Council for their review. The sections that we intend to address are here. We got the Post Falls Municipal Code, Section 1820-130, that deals with some clarifications in our commercial site plan review standards. And the other one deals with Title 18A, the SMART Code. That's Post Falls Municipal Code, Section 18A-2070. That deals with some story calcs. There's how it's currently worded has led to some confusion both internally on how it's applied and with applicants. So hopefully this will speed up some of our reviews. Here is the site plan review, 1821-30. That language that was in there, we tripped over quite a bit. Here we're trying to spell it out where we're saying a change of use within an existing structure of 25% or more, or an expansion of an existing structure of 25% more, or any change of use on the site itself outside the structure where improvements are required within the Post-Municipal Code, utilizing the land as intended, would trigger a commercial site plan review. So you're either A, going to be in a structure of 25%, or going to add 25%, or if you're adding a new use out on the periphery of a site that currently not been a use, then that could trigger site improvements. I see, Ray, you're thinking.
Yes, I am.
What's the reasoning for doing this?
Well, the reasoning is before, this is kind of how it was worded, and so we tried to shorten up it. So if you see the before, a tenant improvement that results in a change of use or an expansion of existing use of 25%. So before, you can see it's very similar. We have a change of use or an expansion. We struck out some stuff to shorten it up before, which by doing that led to confusion. So it's basically doing the same thing as before of how we've been generally applying it, just with some clarification by adding some same language twice, and then adding one additional element saying if you're doing a change of use on the site itself, like out there on the periphery. So it's maybe it's not like in the beginning, in the building, you're not adding a building, but maybe you're putting something out on a lot, turning it into a storage lot. You know, you're changing a function on the land itself rather than for what it's been used previously. Would be you're changing the intent of that, and therefore we would then get, like, the city
So
would
this
get
is just a
frontage improvements.
clarification, basically?
Yes. That's what we're trying to do, so there's less debating amongst ourselves and with customers that come to our counter.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the purpose of this is to try to get frontage improvements for existing commercial properties that are changing use. So if I'm gonna, in my mind's eye, I've got AutoZone on Celtice Way next to and then there's a thrift store, and think in the same building. It used to be the old grocery store. And so if the thrift store, which occupies 25% of that building, changes use and becomes a whatever other type of retailer, then it would trigger frontage improvements on Mullen across
Potentially.
the entire thing,
It's
as well
only
as
if-
on side streets.
If it went from like retail to retail, more than likely, that wouldn't be a change of use. You're doing the same function. You're basically doing like a mercantile to a mercantile, or you're basically doing the same function. But if you went, let's just say you went from a retail
To law office.
Yeah, you
Law
went to-
office.
Yeah, it all turned to offices. And we're like, that's a change of use. And so if the site didn't meet current design standards, yeah, the city could say, okay, that site should be brought up to current standards because you're getting a change of use on that. And how that originated was, so if you had old inferior lots or inferior sites, it was written as a mechanism to keep the city and maintain or move the needle to being more modern or more consistent with new development. So old sites
Right.
didn't stay.
That seems like a way to disincentivize redevelopment of existing commercial corridors and move development of commercial into newer areas, but it seems like a recipe for blight, I guess, in a lot of ways. Because if it's a change of use, or let's just say business, someone goes out of business and then a new different type of business comes in, but now there's a financial barrier because now they're stuck with a bunch of frontage improvements. That seems like it could have long-term ramifications that we may not be fully considering.
And Commissioners, Chris Gabbard, these changes were recommended also by the building code inspector to be more consistent with the IBC and the way it's been interpreted in the past. I think some of this sticky language was this tenant improvement requirement being in the old code there, the tenant improvement requiring triggering a change of use, where you somehow would change the occupancy class. You go from retail to commercial to industrial to something else, but you don't actually have a tenant improvement causing that. So this language was to make it more in line with his interpretation of the building code. So I think it's being applied in this way anyways. Whether or not it stifles development or leads to blight, I couldn't say.
Right, and that's not necessarily, I mean, I'm not saying
No, you're-
it will or it won't. I think it's just something to consider in the conversation, because I get where if there's enough money involved in the change of use, and there's enough money in the development part of whoever's doing the improvements, if it's in their budget to do frontage improvements and curb and sidewalk and all that stuff to do that, then great, awesome. You know, it looks great, and you know, there are street trees and there are parking lot trees and all of the things that turn a nice area or take an older area and turn it nice. I just think that with the large vacancy rate that we have in commercial land right now in our city, I think it'll push the development to lots that already have fully developed frontages.
Well, the bunker bar, that was one that this triggered. It used to be a laundromat.
Right.
They did a change of use there. This code section was exercised. The code that's stricken out, it's implied the same way, was applied on that site and then was exercised.
Right.
And then you have gravel sites. Another thing, you have pre-existing gravel sites that may have a change of use. It allows, you know, then we would get a parking lot permit, get swells, allows us to deal with maybe some environmental impacts on that as well.
Right.
Promote walkability, meet kind of the tenets of some of our comprehensive plan policies. So that's another angle to look at it too.
It seems like they both, it's required now. It's just that the tenant improvement triggered it before.
Yeah.
And so
but then-
you might be able to say that now they're more likely to do a tenant improvement because it's triggered either way.
And I guess maybe where I'm stuck on it, or maybe in my brain it sticks a little bit, is it trigger frontage improvements in public right-of-way versus parking lot improvements? Because if it's just parking lot improvements going from a gravel or parking lot to
Right.
a paved parking lot with swales and whatnot, that's a lot different story than improving public right-of-way in the front.
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff sitting vacant that's in disrepair that we don't need any more barriers to getting a tenant in there, but.
And this verbiage is more in line with the building code, international building code, you said?
That's the interpretation of your building inspector and everything else, with his interpretation of the IBC and
That was their recommendation to,
his recommendation to clean up the language.
gotcha.
So the recommendation came from the building official?
Yes. It is a little bit vague as it currently sits. It has been applied consistently, but.
And the issue was over the bunker bar?
No, that was just an example of
Yeah, that's-
one that I can remember while I'm up here of where this thing was applied. And there's been other sites, you know, that this could be applied to. The other angle is if you get a bunch of tenant improvements or change uses on sites that are inferior, you could keep going through them, but you're never going to get the parking lot, you're never going to get the frontage improvements. And the site itself remains looking blighted visually for, you know, a multitude of years. So the site itself looks, you may get new siding, you may get new interiors, so when you walk in the building, it could look newer, but the exterior appeal and how it affects neighboring properties could be long-lasting for decades.
It's a toughie.
I think the slab in will never change.
Oh, come on.
I mean, it's an example,
Wow,
right?
that would be some serious improvements.
It would be.
What is the
Yeah.
current use of the slab in?
I'm sure probably mouse
Well-
habitat.
As exists
parking
though,
lot.
if someone went in there and used it for something else, they'd have to make the improvements, right?
How we've been applying it, is very much, instead of the tenant improvement or a change of use, more or less, that's kind of how it was being applied.
Yeah. So
It just
right now,
adds some
it's-
clarification.
Right now,
So-
you can't put a tenant in there. They're gonna have to do improvements for
Is
300
this-
feet each way.
Is
Right.
this across from US Bank where that pawn shop was on Saltese?
Ricardo's?
The little burrito place. Is this what they're doing here with this? You making them put in all the asphalt and change all that out there using this right here?
I don't know I know Ricardo's. Are they currently doing that? I don't have.
Where
a-
that
It's
pawn
vacant.
shop was?
It's vacant.
It's
all
vacant.
It's all
It's all
vacant.
vacant right there, right
So if
now.
it went from a pawn shop, I'd have to look how it's currently.
It went to a pawn shop to a nail place.
What about pawn shop to title loan?
As it's written now, it's how it's defined in the building code. As it's rewritten, it probably would trigger a change of use.
Him.
Because you're going from more mercantile to more of a restaurant type use.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, the goal is to bring the city into conformance with the current standards.
Yeah.
We want them to eventually come into code.
Yeah, we understand that, and we want that. We just also don't want it to sit vacant because that's impossible. I think is the point Ray's making.
My point is not necessarily that there are financial barriers when it comes to development or redevelopment. And, as one developer once told me, it's only money, I just need to know how much. But that's the answer, because it's either yes or no, based on how much.
Well, there's a financial decision whether or not to.
Right.
To move into a building, and this is sounds like a big part of it, so.
So, on a site like the Slab Inn, where there's limited frontage, so that, the frontage improvements on Chase, not done. Frontage improvements on Mullen, not done.
You need a raincoat on a rainy day to go inside to stay dry.
Very likely. So, I mean, it's a complete, like, all the stuff that it would trigger. And, I mean, I get the on-site stuff, I guess, where I start to question the financial part would be the frontage improvements. That's where I see it end up being a financial burden. But again, I guess that's just I only bring it up, not necessarily because I think this is a bad change. I bring it up because I think it's important that the city council who is going to be making the decision understand that there are financial barriers to redevelopment that have a tendency to push development into expansion areas that already have, all the commercial improvements done.
Would there be any other way that other towns may be used to trigger the frontage improvements, perhaps, other than something that
I
might
just
inhibit
wanna
this?
So, I mean, this is a very, very standard. Actually, the fact that we are breaking it down to actually qualifying or quantifying it is impressive. In the towns that I've worked in previously, it was pretty straightforward, and actually the determination was not made by the building official, it was made by the planning division. Is it a change of use? Yes, no. If it is, you're bringing it up to current standards, and there wasn't really a question about it. But it does, at least in this situation, by taking out the reference to the IBC, there is a little bit of, even potentially some flexibility within there that it, determines that it's not equal to enough of a change of use that would require bringing it up, and that may actually allow for some additional flexibility under this code, whereas, seeing a change from, an A to a B or whatever, different building code stuff, I'm not gonna try and get into that, I don't know it, but.
Well, this will shift from the IVC to more of the planning division reviewing and doing the determination.
Uh-huh. Yeah, maybe just word it as, I guess it maybe goes without saying, a change of use as determined by the planning director.
Would it be as determined by the zoning code?
That's how I see it. It's in Title 18. That's how it.
Okay.
And then there's another section in the site plan section that says any of the requirements that are already, the zoning administrator can either approve or not approve the requirements in another section later.
So our code actually has federal code numbers, right, in it, doesn't it? For our code has use, for uses, is there like a federal code number for?
It's a functional classification.
Functional classification,
Yes,
thank you.
By the APA, and sometimes we do go look up the functional classification in the LBCS, Land-Based Code Classification System, to see if it's, is it within the same umbrella or not. So we would kind of go and review that on a proposal.
Would it make sense to add that clarification in here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I like that if our code has some flexibility built into it. I think we can be reasonable. The staff can be reasonable. We just don't want to, evaluate the circumstance a little bit.
And some of these terms are already defined. The capitalized terms, use is defined in the code. On that version, you can't really see it, but it's italicized in the actual ordinance ahead of you. Structure is a defined term. Use is a defined defined term. Just for clarification, I think use is defined currently means a specific purpose for which the land or building is designed, arranged, and intended, or the actual utilization of the land or structure. That definition has been in your code for some time.
Okay.
Just
So-
as clarification.
That's helpful. I didn't know the capitalization meant that it was
They are defined terms.
defined. Okay,
Trying to standardize this a little bit.
thank you. That helps.
And theoretically, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, if, let's just say I determined it was a change of use, required the improvements, I believe that being an administrative decision could be appealed, to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they could then state their case of why they don't think it's a change of use. And then, in turn, I believe then you guys could then overturn it or be consistent with it. I believe that would be correct, right, Chris?
That'd be kind of fun.
Or is he going to the appeal? Are you going to the appeal section?
If you give me a moment.
Making the attorney work.
Yes, they can appeal it. They may appeal it to the Planning and Zoning Commission by filing a notice of appeal in 1820, 130 subsection G1.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is some barriers there to arbitrary decisions.
Anything else? John, do you have more
Oh,
slides?
yep, I do have.
Let's get a second.
Okay.
The next section is another area.
I'm
So
not
we
done with this one.
we struck out the entire how it was worded before. I kind of highlighted in yellow. The big stumbling block for this was for stories. A single floor level exceeding 14 feet or 25 feet at ground level. So we didn't know what that meant. So there's different interpretations of how you could be 14 and 25 and one and the same. And so what we did is we tried to clarify what was in Smart Code classified as a story. So you can see the first one, stories may not exceed 14 feet in height from finished floor to finished ceiling. So if you had a multi-story building, each story, that would be your limitations for each story. The ground level non-residential will be a minimum of 11 feet. So if you're a residential, that'd be or commercial, that would be your 11 feet. If the ground level non-residential function is measured between 18 feet and 25 feet, it would be counted as 2 stories. And so what that does is it by doing that, because you guys are familiar with basic traditional zoning where we have a max height of 35 feet, max height of 45, we go by max height. Smart Code is set up by stories, and it kind of is this revolving door effect. It has different implications. And so if you had each story being a really tall, then you could end up really quick up to a 65, 85 foot tall building. So by doing this, it encourages buildings to be not one story, to come up in size, but also caps the height and brings it down. So it kind of brings it more of a normalized effect, so you don't end up with, you know, a 70, 80 foot tall, 4-story building.
Would this allow a single-story building to satisfy smart code?
Yes, coming up, I'm getting to that. So this is in a multi-story function. And the second one, that's how you would apply the 2, is in a multi-story building. So in no event can a non-residential function exceed 25 feet in height as measured from the finished floor to finished ceiling, except for single-level buildings with a flat roof with a parapet. So that leads you to the next sections. There is one caveat on 3, that if you have a mezzanine that goes over a third of the floor area, that would then be counted as an additional story.
So it'd be a 1-story, 3-story?
No, if you had a mezzanine over a third, now suddenly you're at a 2-story. You qualify, it would be a 2-story building. Now we go to the single. A single level building with a pitched roof of at least 18 feet and up to a maximum of 25 feet, measured from the finished floor to the finished ceiling or to the top plate of the wall, shall be counted as 2 stories. And the reason for the top plate of the wall, and I coordinated with the building official on that, so the finished ceiling would be like in here, we have our finished ceiling. But if you remove that, the top plate is the top plate of the sidewall, so you can have an open air ceiling. And so it more or less ends up at that same point, within a couple inches. The next one deals with a single level building with a flat roof with a parapet of at least 20 feet measured with a maximum of 30 feet measured from the finished floor to the top of the parapet, shall be counted as 2 stories. So this right here, a lot of times if you have a parapet and that goes along the exterior, that sticks above the ceiling. So you end up more or less pretty close to that same 25-foot spot in both circumstances. And so the intent of this whole section is to clarify everything we wrestled in on 4 and broke it out into different sections for staff to deal with an applicant on their applications.
Looks clear.
Okay, does it?
Better.
Yeah. Okay, and then this is the agencies that were notified. Here's the comments. School district was neutral. Kootenai County, they'll coordinate at the permitting process at the time of these applications for smart code or the site plans. Health district, no comment. DEQ, they didn't have anything. Highway district, no comment. Any other questions?
Does ceiling have a definition in the code?
I don't believe it does.
Okay.
We could talk to Justin, I know, the building official. To me, like, that's the finished ceiling. That's the elevation. It'd be measurement from what I'm standing on here, the finished floor, to the finished ceiling, what you can touch and feel.
Right, and in this case, there's a, you know, there's an area in there for ductwork
Yes.
and whatnot that's variable.
That would be how, like, in the, for like a residential function, theoretically in a mixed-use building, you could put a finished ceiling in, so maybe you would have some airspace that would be there for some time. Then a commercial use could go in there and have a taller ceiling.
I don't want to throw any wrenches in here, but the link on the PDF here doesn't go to this hearing right here. So I don't know if you're following me. That was the email. It was Ray brought it up. That was the emails we were talking about earlier this week or last week. So my question is there anything that's in the staff report that you haven't talked about today that we need to be aware of before we move forward? I mean, I know I read this through the portal online because it works through the portal part of it, but the PDF, once you download it, this hearing is not in the staff report that's in front of us.
Okay. No, there's nothing that was presented that's not in the staff report.
So hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it online as opposed to the downloaded PDF here because of a link issue or whatever it is. So. All right. What else?
That's it, those 2 sections. That's why we don't do a bunch of sections anymore. We just hit a couple, move on.
And then this is just a recommendation to city council, approve or deny the proposed new language.
Yeah, or if there's an amendment that you folks would like to see to any of this language, we can consider that or bring it back. This is the first public hearing because we're touching the zoning ordinance. It requires it to come through P&Z first, through public hearing, and then a recommendation to council. So I believe in your books, under Section 6 legislative items would be the motion would to recommend approval of X, Y, and Z, or denial of X, Y, and Z, or to recommend approval with amendments. There is some flexibility on this motion or consideration, or if the commission wants to table it and bring it back, they can do that as well.
Okay.
So.
All right. I think first things first, close out the public hearing. Do we have any more discussion? I think we've had some good discussion. Lots of good questions, answers.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, there were no public comments.
True. Sorry, thank you.
No problem.
No public.
No public.
No,
no public.
That's why I figured there's no public. Thank you. If there's no more discussion, anybody would like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Chris, where did you say that was in here?
I printed a copy off of mine. I think it's under 6 legislative items. I have a page 63 on the bottom of my printed page, but I don't know if that's accurate.
That's correct.
Oh. And Commission, I combined these items, and I haven't run code changes through you folks before, so I combined, John had originally suggested we break these out into 2 separate ordinances, and I said, that's silly, why would we want 2 separate hearings? But now seeing the, the discussion, in the future, we can bring ordinance changes back in separate ordinances if it's your preference. So if you aren't in love with part of this, you can move forward on one of the sections and not the other. And in the future, we can break them out again. So that was on my recommendation, though I'm seeing that it might be problematic in the future.
I'm not sure if it is necessarily. I do like having them all kind of put together. It's a nice little neat package if we need to parse something out. Then
Well, it's all Title 18, which is your zoning code.
right.
And because these 2 were coming at the same time, I said, let's just do it in one public hearing, and the same with council. But
I think it makes sense to do that.
But we also have a second ordinance that's also 18, so maybe it makes sense to break them out in the future. It depends on how they come in.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on the circumstances and what's actually changing.
Yes.
So,
You gonna make a motion?
anybody like to make a motion?
I'm just trying to figure out how to do it.
I will move to recommend approval of, let's see, let me make sure I get it right. File number TA 24-1, Title 18 and Title 18A text amendment. I guess I'm supposed to go into some sort of a reasoning here, but finding that the clarifications make sense and that it should clarify things moving forward.
Agreed.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ampe,
Yes.
Wilhelm,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Walton,
Yes.
Schotthauer,
Yes.
Kimball.
Yes.
All right, that will move on to city council. All right, and the final public hearing of the night. Open that. File number TA-23-2, Title 18 Tiny Homes Ordinance.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, Ethan Porter, one of the planners of the City of Post Falls. You did see this slide throughout your workshops, but I did add a couple new slides, and kind of most of it's pretty much the same, but I'll run through it as best I can and try not to be boring. So here we are with basically how we got here. Again, the workshops kind of listed there. We went through from some housing prices availability, needing that missing middle, drafted cottage homes, went through cottage homes, ordinance, got it approved, and then worked on tiny homes afterwards with some further workshops and some more workshops. And here we are now in the public hearing process for approval to look at staff presenting this for recommending approval to City Council. And so I'll go through the standards of the slide of kind of what tiny homes, and just reiterate again what we've kind of covered in the workshops and some new kind of visuals that I put in here as well. But basically the highlights of this ordinance and tiny homes in general would be that we have standards for them and that they are going to be on permanent foundation. The requirement will be in place. There will be no tiny homes on wheels permitted for that. I know a lot of the nation does that, but the city of Post Falls, we looked at that not meeting building code, nor do I think we want that as part of the product. And so sites also can include plat or common lot development, so you can plat out individual lots for tiny homes, or you can have it on one large lot, common lot for development like that. They're also permitted to have garage or carports if desired. They have open space, green space requirements. Predominantly, they are rear or side loaded homes. And then they promote a diverse look amongst neighboring tiny homes. So going into basically what a tiny home is, as you guys kind of already are aware, but 800 square feet or less, pre-manufactured, stick-built tiny home for the living area. So that kind of makes up that definition for tiny home. We look at kind of where we're going to implement this, and you can see there the implementing zoning district on the screen: R2, R3, RM, and LC. They're allowed in the mixed zone for CCM with the development agreement, and then special use is going to be required in the CCS as well as the R1 zones. The comprehensive plan and future land use designations, you can kind of see they're labeled for each one of those, where the R2, the RM, the R3, and the LC kind of fit in there with the CCM, and kind of just laying out where that's going to be allowed for the future land use designations. They aren't going to be allowed in business industrial, which is industrial, heavy industrial, technology mixed, or if the focus area doesn't permit it or allow it, or doesn't have that guiding principle for those uses. Looking at some of the general design standards, it's basically broken up into general design standards, then we look at single family platted lots, and then we look at multifamily or common lot development. So starting off with some of the general design standards, the garages, nothing new here that you haven't seen, but front loaded 336 square feet, rear loaded 500 square feet, and then the attached garages for front loaded, they just can't exceed that 66% of that frontage. We'll look at porches for tiny homes, and the minimum depth of 6 feet. Front loaded can't be less than 50, and rear loaded can't be less than 80 square feet in size. So to kind of capture this, staff did some renderings. We look at some different views on the potential product that could be built. And so here you can see the porch in the top right. You have 6 feet. Excuse me, those are inches, but they should say feet. 6 feet and by 14 feet, so there's no less than 6 feet there, as well as you're making over 80 square feet for the porch. The tiny house here, that rendition is 14 feet wide, and then that living area is 618 square feet. And this would be like a rear loaded product, excuse me, for a tiny home. So looking at a front loaded concept, then you have the porch at 7 feet and 7 feet 4 inches, and that would basically meet that no less than 6 feet again, and then your porch being above 50 square feet, which it is. This garage width is 12 feet 8 inches. The tiny home width is 20 feet, and that garage face is going to be less than, actually, it was projected at 63, but it's going to be less than 63, just based on that house, that face of the house there. So, and that living area for this rendering was about 749 square feet. So this kind of gives a visual idea, just a little more identifier on the porch aspect for that, because I know you didn't have that in the previous workshops. The architectural design, you're aware of and seen this, about the 2 elements, minimum of 2 elements within that list that staff has presented. One of the highlights is the vinyl siding. Can't be within 10 feet of another structure with vinyl siding. And then accessory structures must match that architectural style and meet the code separation for fire. So green space, so generally the tiny homes got to they must provide 550 square feet of common green space per unit and provide pet waste cleanup station for the 8 or more unit kind of developments. The 8 or more also must have 50% of the common open space centrally located, with 20% of it fronting a street, or fronting, excuse me, 20% of the green space for that fronting a street. So basically you have part of it fronting the street and the other part is, the rest of the development. Looking kind of like into the maintenance for that common green space, I know there was some communication and discussion with this on how do we maintain it and ensure it's being maintained for development. So that underlined section on the bottom there, the zoning administrator may approve an alternate guarantee of maintenance and limitation to green space use upon a determination that the alternative provides the equivalent guarantee that the green space will be adequately maintained. So they can come up with a crafty way to kind of show how they're going to do that, how that's going to be maintained, whether that be through easements or such amongst the properties for the green space. So that's just another avenue too that allows us to ensure that the maintenance of the green space will be provided. Some more about that. Tiny homes placed in individual lots, they will require the 325 square feet of common green space. They'll only require that green space, but they need a functional yard as well, so that location in the rear side yard and not within the front yard setback. So with our dimensioning, staff kind of looked at this, and based on the setbacks as well as kind of what would be a typical lot in placement of a tiny home, it fell in line with this, basically to have at least equal to at least 10% of the parcel area, and then have that minimum dimension at 12 feet or less than 10 feet for parcels less than 2,400 square feet. Fencing is prohibited in the common green spaces unless it's going to be for some type of pickleball court or something where you do have flying objects that you probably need to contain. That's outlined more so in the ordinance, but on here it just generally is prohibited. Off-street parking stalls per unit, we have 2 for single-family lots and then 1.5 per multifamily. When you have a cluster of parking that you're not able to have on-street parking or in front of green or street parking, then you're required to provide that 0.25 parking stalls per unit. So when you don't have parking on street or in front of green space, you provide that clustered parking there based on that calculation. Looking at the on-street parking, this was kind of an addition in one of the later workshops, but you can have up to 50% of the required parking spaces on-street for the required parking that is needed for the site. And so that allows a little bit more diverse and flexibility with making sure parking standards are being met. This is an addition to and still in the works of what we're needed to add into for staff being discussing per a comment from the workshop, but essentially the idea is the standalone tiny home projects must be a maximum of 5 acres and they can't be adjacent to another tiny home development. So you have basically 2 5 acres next to each other, then you have a 10-acre tiny home development. So the look and feel, I think, is what was trying to encapsulate here, but this wording is still going to be reworked with legal to kind of incorporate into the ordinance, but at least we wanted to bring it forth, let you know that this was a comment and discussion from the workshop that we want to kind of iron out a little more. But
Yes, the draft ordinance you have doesn't have this language. This
Correct.
is basically draft language being proposed.
I would suggest something to, if you want a maximum of 5 acres, but if you have 2 1-acre parcels next to each other, I'm assuming you're good with the 2 1-acre tiny home projects next to each other, but just don't want 2 5-acre ones next to each other. You don't want 2 of them adjoining each other totaling more than 5 acres.
Yeah, we can
Is that
reword it
kinda-
like,
That would be something to think about on the
Yeah.
wording, because you want to make, if it's let's just say it's a couple of next door neighbor city lots.
yeah, 2 2-acre lots. We have some that are 2, 2.5 that are side by side.
Right, and you got a bunch of, 10,000 square foot lots in the middle of the residential area of Post Falls that could utilize this, then you want to make sure
What do you
that,
mean by we have some?
What's that?
What do you mean? You said we have some?
We have
that
some 2, 2.5-acre lots. People that have split 5-acre lots in
Yeah.
half that are in a
You know,
county
we have lots
pocket.
like that in town, not that we have proposed tiny home.
No, we have
projects.
no. Yeah, no.
All right.
I just mean 2.5 acre lots.
Don't get me excited
I
like
know,
that.
I
Sorry,
thought the same
sorry.
thing for a minute.
Yeah, so this will then be reworked, kind of, we'll talk about that then and kind of look at that aspect too, because, yeah, get a little more clarification on that. Going into the single-family tiny home standards, again, I don't think nothing new here that you've seen, but, you know, primarily they're going to be rear and side loaded. The zoning administrator can grant up to 50% of lots being front loaded. And then they're encouraged, the tiny homes, to front to green space and then have that pedestrian path constructed basically to have them access to that next pedestrian network. The lot area minimum is 2,000 square feet. Corner lots can't be narrower than 25 feet, but the math didn't just work out for those. So the setbacks and height limitations are the front 16 feet, principal plane, the side is a net 10. So as long as there's 10 feet of total, 5 and 5, 7 and 3, or 6 and 4, that would be the side setback. The rear setback for front-loaded tiny homes would be 12 feet, and then the rear for rear-loaded would be 20 feet just for that driving parking pad. And then you have the flanking street 10 feet and the height at 25 feet. Looking at accessory structures, they can't exceed the height of the primary structure and not to exceed 1 story. So the sum of all the permitted accessory structures cannot exceed 770 or 720 square feet, and no single structure can exceed 500 square feet. So here's some, I guess you did see this actually at probably the last workshop, but this is just that rendition of kind of where this could be potentially put in place and actually built, and kind of what that built environment may look like from some of these. So you're at Mullen Avenue and William Street on that northwest corner. And so that kind of shows there are 7 tiny homes. You have the ones right along Mullen are primarily front loaded, and then you have the side loaded one right along William Street there, or two side loaded, one side loaded and one front loaded on William Street, and so the rest would then be rear loaded. You can see the garages access through the alleyway, but it kind of gives you a feel and idea of what that may look like if built out, and so just as a kind of illustration.
And Ross, this is not a proposed project. Anna, on staff, drew those up, actually brought those into Google Earth and overlaid it, so.
Yes.
I have a quick question before you
yeah.
go farther on the parking. If you're rear loaded, is it
You have garages in the back right off
single?
the alley.
Yeah, but a single car, or are they 2-car garages generally?
I think
can't remember
this
what-
rendering was a single car garage.
So then so that unit only has parking for 1 garage.
It would have a parking pad too that
It
you
will
would
have a
park, yes. So you would
parking
have
pad.
technically in tandem, one inside
Okay.
and then one outside.
Okay,
So,
wanted to make sure on that. Thank you.
So with what you said, you couldn't park right in front of your house. You say it's rear?
rear loaded, correct.
Right.
So depending on the development, I don't think this one, because I don't think there was 8 that.
You could park on the street in front of your
Correct, that's what I
house.
was getting at, yep.
Right.
They want a courtyard, not a parking lot in the middle, more or less.
Yeah, they're just talking about off-street
But I mean, isn't the
parking,
purpose
rear
using a
loaded.
smaller lot? You only got so much area, and you might not be able to put a rear parking in.
That's where the street parking, I think, was one of our big recommendations and is incorporated here, right?
Yeah.
Can we
And
look
you're
at
gonna
that
have, a
again?
rear loaded's gonna have that rear setback at 20 feet. That's basically your parking pad. And then that goes into the garage. And so then it automatically kind of creates out of itself in the setback 2 parking stalls, if they want a garage. And you don't have to put it in, they can just do a drive aisle in and parking pad.
The other benefit to that is that by having them rear-loaded, then we're not taking up the street frontage with the driveway, a driveway approach. Now you have the entire width of what would have been a driveway. Now you can park your car there.
I'm just saying, I have the perfect property for this. It's already engineered.
I'll just change it all.
I would have to.
That's for another day.
Commissioner Carey, did that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. So the green infrastructure, again, nothing new that you've seen here. We kind of highlight the definitions of solar collection system and xeriscaping as well, and then that fence kind of code section too that we address also. But that green infrastructure would allow that reduction in open space requirements if they provide so much on their development. And going into those definitions, we have solar collection system outlined and labeled here. You can see it in that draft ordinance also. And then we have the green roof definition also included.
That'd be considered living underground.
That's today, ain't it?
Technically.
Only for today.
That would be-
I guess that would depend on how that's constructed. Xeriscaping, so when at least 75% of the common green space utilizes xeriscaping, meeting the requirements of that code section, the common green space requirements may be reduced by 50 square feet for each dwelling unit. So just a little bit more clarification on that xeriscaping, adding a quantity there. This leads us into the multifamily tiny homes, kind of common lot developments. And so site design and orientation, a lot of it's kind of going to be the same. You have the rear and side load. This one is a little bit different because through a special use permit, you'd have to get through your access for the front load through a special use permit for multifamily. And then tiny homes are encouraged to front that green space, and they must have a pedestrian path, again, connected to that sidewalk or the next pedestrian network. Separation, so we're looking at the adopted building code, making sure the fire rating is met for that. The setbacks listed there, I don't think anything really changed that you haven't seen on this slide. That additional 0.25 parking spaces must be provided. Again, it's that clustered parking, so that's carried over into both. The green infrastructure, again, what we kind of commented, there's some incentive there to reduce your common green space requirements. And then again, the solar collection system and xeriscaping is also within the multifamily design standards here. And then this one is 50% for multifamily. The single family did highlight the 75% xeriscaping. This for multifamily would be at 50%. Nothing new here. Consolidated parking structures may be considered, and then the outside storage and solid waste areas, they must meet our solid waste screening requirements for that. Again, we have the cottage home and the tiny home kind of code looking at it, differentiation between the two, but or comparison, but this hasn't changed from what you last saw either. So with that being said, I can take any questions you have.
Can you go back to that slide, last slide one
Yep.
more time?
It's fairly similar from the cottage home standards. It's just obviously things are getting smaller, and we had a lot more discussion and comments through the tiny home workshops than the cottage home, so which was good. Brought us to where we are now.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
There was discussion at our workshop about maybe addressing fee structure
Oh, yeah.
so that a 20,000 square foot custom home doesn't have the same fees as a 500 square foot tiny house.
Mhm.
Has there been any progress on that?
I was like, that's a little bit outside of the discussions I was
We're kicking off the impact fee study now. And the impact fee study, one of the pieces within that is looking at scaling residential fees, specifically related to how many square feet of a house. So whether that ends up being phased in 500 square feet or less, or 500 to 1,000 square feet, or if we just look at, it's $2 a square foot, or I'm just saying a number,
Right.
right? So,
Okay.
but that is going to be studied, looked at, and if it seems to work, adopted in the update. That'll probably be about a year out, though.
About a year out.
Yep.
What would apply right now is regular impact fees on each of those little ones. So that is unrealistic, right? That somebody's going to come in.
Our goal is to be able to try and provide varieties of housing types and help to also reduce cost, right?
Okay,
So,
right.
yes, our goal with the,
Then really
new
is in a
fee
year or
structures.
so, be able to start kind
Yeah.
of get this rocking and rolling,
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully.
if somebody
That's the
wanted
key.
to take it on now, they
Okay.
would be subject to today's fees.
Right, okay,
But yes, our goal is to create a different fee structure
Yeah.
so that smaller houses pay lesser fees.
okay.
There's a good chance if someone did a project, by the time they got through all the development planning, get into construction plans, they'd go through the winter, they wouldn't even get
Right, okay.
maybe going till next spring, and of which they'd communicate with us. We'd be fully transparent on the impact fees. They more
Okay.
than likely would then hold their cards a little tight on their permits, and then they would then come in and align that if that's the path they went.
Okay, okay. That makes sense.
Cool. Any other questions? Any public comment? Nope.
Nothing.
All right. Nothing? All right. Close out the hearing. I will just make a comment that this is nice to see it's finally getting to the finish line. Is what, almost a 2-year process, multiple hearings and workshops. And a lot of the stuff that is in this final, as it's been brought up tonight, was the input from not only this commission, but city council and many, many others. So it's nice to see this, and hopefully, the impact fee, I think, will kind of, hopefully, I wouldn't say fix itself, but like what John said, if somebody comes up now, it could be a whole year before they even get to that point. But hopefully this fills in that missing middle and allows for, quote-unquote, affordable housing so people can get into the houses. That's my thought and my 2 cents. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
Boy, it's sad that Post Falls got to the point that we gotta do tiny homes to be affordable. But it is what it is.
It's not just Post Falls, though.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
yeah, it's just not.
Everywhere.
Just us.
I think if we can make it work, people will follow it, and it'll be
Mhm.
people are gonna wanna have their kids or their parents or, living next to them, and I think it's gonna, if we can make it work.
Mhm. Time will tell.
Yeah, I think it's another tool in the tool belt, if you will, when it comes to options for home ownership. I think it has the opportunity or the ability to drastically affect both the elderly population when it comes to retirement and snowbird and having a small footprint for them to utilize. And, one way to look at it would be is that if a couple who is a retired couple in a tiny home who is snowbirding is not using up a single-family home that could be used by a family. So, so there's, having that product on the market, I think will fill a niche, and it may also fill the first-time home buyer niche as well. Although I don't know if that's as likely. But that said, it's just another tool in the tool belt, and one of the reasons that we don't have a whole bunch of questions is because we've had a bunch of workshops and hashed all of this stuff out before. So, yeah.
All right.
Good job, Ethan. John?
It sounds like,
Ethan, though.
it sounds like we're all pretty much on the same page. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I will. I'll move to recommend approval of TA-23-2, Title 18 Tiny Home Ordinance, which establishes performance standards for tiny home residential developments and updates definitions.
Okay, we have a motion. Anybody like to make a second?
Commission,
Oh.
I believe the staff recommendation also had that proposed amendment to include the limitation on adjacent 5-acre parcel developments to not allow them to be contiguous to each other.
Up to 5 acres, as Ray kind of suggested, and we can tweak that language. I understand what you're going for, so we can tweak that a bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slippery slope.
So
How should
I thought,
we word, does that need to be in this then?
well, I thought it wasn't in here yet.
Yeah. So you want a contiguous up to 5. So you could have like a couple 1 acre lots or,
Allow up to 5 contiguous acres of tiny home development, adjoining acres.
Okay, so you're talking.
Okay, so how are we going to say it?
Sorry, so the recommendation to move this forward would be to approve the draft ordinance as proposed with the staff's, with direction to staff to include this language of up to 5 acres of contiguous development.
Yeah, a limitation of up to 5 acres of continuous. Okay, would you like to rescind your motion?
I apologize, I just
That's
wanted to
okay.
clarify. I
Yeah,
just wanted to
I'll
clarify
rescind
that.
my motion.
Okay.
Oh, I don't have all
Thank
the
you.
words there.
No, you're good. I will
I
move
know,
to
I hear you.
recommend approval of file number TA 23-2, Title 18 Tiny Home Ordinance, which is to establish performance standards for tiny home residential developments and to update definitions and standards, to amend the proposed ordinance to limit tiny home development to a maximum of 5 acres of contiguous tiny home use. Yeah.
All right, so we had the motion was rescinded, and we have a new motion on the table with that minor change. And do we have anybody want to make a second?
Are we good?
I'll second it, yeah.
Okay, and we have a second. Roll call, please.
Carrie? Yes. Walton?
Yes.
Butthauer?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Wilhelm?
Yes.
Stephenson?
Yes.
Yes.
Kimball?
Kimball, yes.
I get it.
All right.
Left out.
That'll move to city council now. Next item on the agenda, administrative or staff reports.
I was just going to say I thank you guys for having engagement and comments and questions when we present. It allows us to maybe understand how we can maybe improve our presentations a little bit better, understand kind of what maybe more meat on the bones on our presentation, maybe when we move it to city council that we can add. So I appreciate the comments and the questions on the presentations.
Good. Any commissioner comments tonight?
Thank goodness we have Ray here.
I'd like to congratulate Mr. Paulus.
Yep.
I can't wait to hear you not say assistant city engineer, but say city engineer, and I want to know how many times you mess that up when you get up to the podium.
I haven't heard that.
Yep. Was that just past, what, week or two? Nice little promotion with Bill's retirement. Yep. Congrats. All right.
Only have one meeting. Weren't we going to have 2 meetings at some point?
Did you want 2 meetings?
For this month, but
One big one.
Oh.
We did one big one.
That was last month.
Yeah, we had a choice to do 2 or 1 large one.
Oh, okay, okay.
Did one large one.
We
Okay.
leaned to have 1 longer
Oh,
meeting.
okay, that was,
And we,
I got it.
and we survived.
Yes, we did, so.
And we moved on. Okay. Anything else? All right. Item number 7, adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned.